going to the cloud. Welcome to the Founders Table. I'm Dr. DeShaun Williams, and this is where ideas get clearer, decisions get stronger, and momentum starts to build. If you're getting value from these conversations, make sure that you're following the show, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Today, I'm joined by Miss Anna, and a little bit about Miss Anna Elizabeth. She is the She is the creator of the Five Facets Philosophy on healing and identity first framework that helps individuals and organizations understand what is driving them at their core. I could go on and on about who Miss Anna Elizabeth is, but instead of me doing that, I will allow her to introduce herself and then we will go into the topic. So, how are you doing today?
I am well, Dr. DeShaun, and I am honored to be here.
It is definitely an honor to have you on the show. I know that we met on at Speaker Connections,
Hmm.
and and we just kind of clicked right off hand. And so, of course, I've given a little bit of a bio or a little bit of an introduction about you, but I always think it is best if the audience hears it directly from you.
Okay, well, thank you. Um, in a very condensed version, my work began following a 7-year string of significant life loss events that started with the unexpected death of my firstborn, following unexpected delivery complications. Then I had two second trimester miscarriages, two complicated but successful pregnancies, a 6-week psychiatric stay for severe depression, and one final pregnancy. 6 weeks before that child was born, I discovered that my husband and my best friend were having an affair. So, in a very short period of time, there were some significant compounding losses. And I'm sure that most anybody listen can identify a time in their life when it just seemed like there was one thing after another where life wasn't going quite the way they expected. Hours after my son died, I had this thought that I didn't want to spend a lifetime mourning him. And what I say is, I didn't know what that meant, what it looked like on the other side, or how I was going to get there. But a seed had been planted. And as those losses started stacking, there was one question that drove me forward. And that is, how is it that some people go on to live happy, fulfilled lives following tragedy, mishap, or mayhem, while others succumb to drugs, despair, life avoid, or suicide? What I knew at my core, and I had seen in stories throughout my life, is that there were people who had transcended what many of us would consider insurmountable. And I knew that there was something within each one of us that would help us to do that, to achieve what I call our next level potential, whether that's healing heartache or whether it is making the next move, taking your business to the next level. Now, obviously, this language has evolved as my work with it has evolved, but ultimately, that one question spawned thousands more questions, and I relentlessly pursued the answers. What I ended up discovering is that we are all born with five, what I call universal gifts. They're the academic, emotional, physical, social, and spiritual sides of the self. We're literally born with them. It has nothing to do with what is outside of us. Now, where it goes from universal to individual is each one of us has our own individual hierarchy of these facets, and they impact and influence how we see and experience what is happening outside of us based on where that facet is in your hierarchy. And so, what I've been doing for around 20 years now is helping people get in touch, understand this intrinsic human blueprint system. They can better understand themselves and then learn to put those facets to work for them so they can achieve whatever it is that they're trying to achieve.
Whew, it's that's a it's a heavy topic. It's a lot of heavy topics that was mentioned in there. Um, from losing your child, and this I understand. I, I I can't say I relate, but I understand. And you know, dealing with tragedy, dealing with heartbreak, depression, and then dealing with finding out that the person that you love is having an affair on you. Those can definitely take a toll on a person. And I can speak firsthand on depression because it's something that it's something that I struggle with every day. It's something that I live with every single day. I always say there's some days that's good. There's some days where it's just kind of like, do we really want to be here today? But trying to find the good things and trying to figure out the understanding that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, as I always say. Or my favorite, I always go out and try to find the leprechaun with the pot of gold. Uh,
Yeah, I love that.
um, it makes things a little bit easier. I can't always say it makes it a lot easier, but it does make it a little easier.
Mhm.
I definitely want to say you mentioned that you've been doing this work for almost 20 years. That definitely doesn't make me feel as old as I feel because I'm 28, so um, definitely doesn't. I'm getting close to 30, but you know, doesn't make me feel as bad as I normally do when I tell people my age.
Oh,
And it's like I said, it's a lot of you mentioned a lot of topics that hold a lot of weight. Some could see it as a possibly trigger warning, but at some point we have to know when we need to work on these things, when we need to, because if it always, in my perspective, and this is just my opinion, if it's always trigger us, then it means that we have something that we need to work on. And when we finally work on it, eventually that trigger kind of starts to kind of kind of goes away. Um, and then, so I want to go into the first question. And I know you kind of already answered it, but if you don't mind going into a little bit more depth about it, what was the defining moment that changed the direction of your entrepreneurial journey?
it really started. I don't know. I've always been creative, never really considered myself an entrepreneur, and yet I've always been involved in small business of some kind. And really, the trajectory was when I discovered those five facets, when that first revealed itself to me, and I knew that that's what it was. Anytime I could rub two nickels together and find somebody who wanted to listen, I would go around and share what these five facets were to inspire people to know that they had something they could tap into. Where the pivot really came in was after a couple of years of doing this, I started thinking, okay, well, this is great. This is wonderful. But what do people actually do with this? Like it's one thing to know something, it's another. And I recently read a quote is wisdom is knowledge put into action. Something like that. I think I butchered it, but it's along those lines. And so what I did is I started pouring through all of the answers that I had found to those thousands of questions. And what I started noticing were themes that revealed themselves. And from there, what I did is I developed this coaching program, the Five Facets Philosophy on Healing that you mentioned. And for me, I have redefined what loss, grief, and healing are. I think it's really important for us to recognize that they are autonomous and more importantly, that loss is so much more than death. So, especially in this culture, but in many cultures, we tend to think when somebody says, oh, loss or I'm grieving, it's like, oh, somebody died. And there are so many more events and experiences in life that trigger conflict. And you touched on this earlier about a trigger. When you feel triggered, something, you need to focus on something. And ultimately, that trigger can be mental conflict, it can be emotional conflict, it can be confusion, it could be your body just doesn't feel healthy, your relationships don't feel healthy, or you're being impacted by someone. To me, that conflict is actually a signal that something is asking to be healed. And it exists, that conflict or suffering or grief can be in any or multiple or all of those five facets. And so, one of the things that I talk about is when we're feeling overwhelmed, it's like this umbrella of all these unseen things they're like ghosts batting at us in the dark. Once we can shine a spotlight on one of them, now it no longer has control over us. We have control to choose. And I think I've digressed away from your question. Um, but yeah, oh, when so that really became the spark for, okay, now I'm going to actually step in and become an entrepreneur and help people to fully understand not just their own intrinsic wiring, but the collective intrinsic wiring. So when we can do that, we can lead ourselves and others. Oh, heavens, excuse me. All right, I know you said there's little editing and this is real time. Well, this is real life, right? The area, the workers decided to come and trim right outside my window, of course. Um, but anyway, so that's when I really that pivot happened, is that this is information that has in the years that I've been using it now as a coaching tool to help people, it's not just changed my life when I've applied the concepts to my own life, it really has impacted and changed the direction for the clients that I've worked with.
I absolutely love that. And I know earlier you said kind of digress from the question. It I never saw this a digress because it was okay, this is why I do it. Now let me go back to the results and how like the results and then kind of package it all together. And I absolutely love that because we can give surface level reasons of why we did this, but that connection of what it brings and how it makes someone feel and how you mentioned when someone says, "Oh, I had a loss," or "I'm grieving," and they immediately think, "Someone did someone pass away?" Could be they lost a job. They didn't get the job they hoped they got. I'm I'm gonna use me for an example.
Yeah,
Um, I've applied to be in the speaking competition, and I had to make it to the top 100 in order to be in the speaking competition. And what and for so long, having a negative mindset growing up with that, it's like, what if I don't get this? What if I don't get this opportunity? And then you get an email that says, congratulations, you're one of the top 100 speakers. And it's like, oh, so, and, but what if I didn't get that? Okay, that's a loss.
it is.
What if, and then for entrepreneurs, when we sit down and we think about it as entrepreneurs, we roll out this brand new program or this brand new service or product, and we think it's going to take off, and we're promoting it, promoting it, promoting it. We're hitting the pain points, we're telling them why they need to have it, what it's going to do for them, and why they should get it from us. And all we hear is crickets. And we never get a single sale on it. Well, if we've made it ourselves, if it's a product that we've put our time and effort in, we've taken a loss off of the product that we have, off all the ingredients that we have used to build this product.
Yeah.
But also, we've lost it. If it's a service or a program, we've lost that time. And a lot of entrepreneurs will sit there and think, well, this is a waste. I don't want to do this anymore. And now they're at a loss because they're at this crossroads where they don't know what they should do next. And so I love how you went in and discussed a loss, or grieving just doesn't mean that you lost someone. It could be a relationship. Maybe the relationship didn't work out the way that you wanted to. Maybe there's some conflicts going on behind closed doors that no one knows about. But when you go out, you're smiling, but your body language doesn't show that you're happy. So, all these different things, they can be a loss and they can cause you to grieve. Me being an insomniac, I don't sleep that much. That's a loss because some days I have that full energy. Some days I'm just running on 3, 4 cups of coffee, a Red Bull, and a
Again,
Dr. Pepper.
that sleep is when our body repairs itself. So it could be loss of physical health. It could be loss of emotional security. It could be loss of financial security. You mentioned a job loss. It could be loss of freedom to
Right,
do and explore. And it's going to be different for every single person. And this is where the collective compassion comes in. So if somebody's, say, physical facet is at the very top of their hierarchy, and within that physical facet, presentation, details, design are all critical. And so the way somebody dresses, the way somebody presents themselves. Now, this is just one of so many examples within the physical facet. Could have to do with activity or tangible objects. But let's just say, using those characteristics, now, if somebody else's physical facet is at the bottom, and what I didn't share is what's at the top of your hierarchy. The facet that is the top of your hierarchy is actually driving the bus of you. It's simultaneously driving your suffering and your success, and it needs to be managed. The facet that's at the bottom of your hierarchy is kind of like the foundation of a house, and most people, it's out of sight, out of mind until something breaks down and they have to give it attention. So what's at the bottom needs intentional support. So if we take what's at the top and we take, say, that physical facet with those particular dynamics are at the top. Now, my physical facet literally is at the bottom of my hierarchy. And what that means is I have to be intentional about supporting it. My physical environment isn't at the utmost priority. My physical body isn't the utmost priority because what is at the top is garnering all of my attention. So when I was asked to give my TEDx talk, I was at the unhealthiest that I had been in my life. I was at the heaviest weight. I didn't feel great about my body. And I was like, okay, the thought of getting on a big stage in front of all these people with where I was at. And for me, because that facet has the least daily impact and influence, doesn't mean there's no impact or influence, but it has the least amount. For me, it was a relatively simple decision. I was like, okay, the message that I want to share, the work that I'm building, and the stages that I want to be on are more important than this. And so, what am I going to do? I went out, I bought an outfit. I look back at that now, I'm like, what was I thinking with the clothes I was wearing? And I'm like, but that's what I needed to do at the time. It's like, okay, problem solved. And I went and I did it with confidence. And obviously, I was terrified, but you
yeah,
do it afraid. There's many people who've said that, do it afraid, right? And so that's where those dynamics come in when we can understand that. So somebody whose physical facet with those dynamics are at the top of their hierarchy, they might have postponed that talk. They might have said, oh, another time. And when I'm better prepared. And we all say, the right time is now. I mean, we hear that, and yet we have very real dynamics in our lives. You, insomnia, you, periods of depression, as you mentioned, those are very real life aspects that we're navigating. And so it's learning again to understand the structure. And I believe when we do that, number one, we can better put our gifts to work for us. And two, we can be more compassionate when we understand these structures and how they vary. We can have more compassion for other people. And when we can do both of those things, we are being more successful as an individual and as a whole. And that's where like business comes in. Some of the biggest business failures are have to do with relationships or misunderstandings or a lack of cohesion. And the more tools we have to help us with that, the better off we are. And whereas many models, the ones that I'm familiar with that look at personalities, behaviors, how you interact, those are fabulous tools. What the Five Facets does is it actually takes what's underneath that. So your facet structure is actually what is informing how you're conditioned, how you're perceiving things, how you are navigating life. And so now we go one step deeper into that to better understand ourselves and others. And then to put those tools, those gifts to work for us again to achieve. And we really can move mountains when we start understanding this. That's cliche, but
Hey, it's sometimes cliche, it works. And
yeah.
I um moving mountains amazing because like um as a Christian, I always I can't move the mountain, but my God will. And so I always say that. And I know that you mentioned the umbrella, and the first thing that came to my mind was here in West Virginia, where I'm located at. You can have an umbrella, but the way that the wind blows and the way that the rain hits, you're probably gonna get just as wet with the umbrella as you would have without the umbrella. And sometimes that's what it takes is you have to go in and you have to do what I call the dirty work. And I just kind of want to ask you this question. If someone comes to you and they want to work with you and you say, "Hey, okay, we've been able to assess this. We've been able to understand this and what's causing this and what you need to do. Let's take it one step deeper." And they say, "Well, I'm not ready to dig any deeper. I don't want to go any deeper." How would you or how do you um navigate around that?
Mm. So when somebody goes through the entire 5-part program, we're gaining insight into how they've navigated suffering and success, struggle and success to this point. And as we're learning their, what I call processes, the facets hierarchy, this facet structure for that individual reveals itself. I don't create it. So you're kind of asking two different questions, not knowing everything. That's why I'm sort of explaining.
Okay.
So where I have had a couple of situations where so this hierarchy, it's not what we do, it's how we are truly intrinsically wired. And that doesn't change through life. What changes is how we support the facets. Now, I have had two clients, well, three actually, who were resistant to the facet structure that revealed. So one of them, one client, we'd gone through the introduction of this. We learned the facet structure in module 3 of 5. So she was going through, she called me, she's like, I'm out on a walk, and I'm like thinking about everything we've talked about, and here's my structure. And she said, I was feeling so proud. And then she said, oh my God, wait a minute, there's 5. I only have 4. What am I missing? What am I missing? And so she's telling this, and she's like, she goes, Anna, the one that was missing was the emotional facet. And I knew immediately. She goes, but I don't want my emotional facet to be top of my hierarchy. I don't want to be seen as somebody who's like emotional and neurotic and blah, blah, blah. Again, how she perceived it. However, this woman was open enough. She happened to be a social worker, and she was like, oh my gosh, my life makes sense now. So she was open to it. I had another client who her social facet was at the top of her hierarchy. And as we did the work, everything, like everything from the time she was a little girl, social, connection. So the social facet is about connection to the world around us. But her interpretation of it was a social butterfly. And she says, I'm not. And so I'm like, so what I do to answer your question is I ask more questions. I'm kind of the queen of questions. And so we spent an hour talking and digging deeper. And all of a sudden she went, wow, oh my gosh. Because I kept saying it's not about being a social butterfly. It's how you connect to the world around you. And then all of a sudden she went, oh my gosh, every single morning I wake up, and she was also very faith driven and connect God, who can I serve today? How can you work through me today? Every day she says, I wake up and I'm like, oh, Aunt Susie's birthday is next Wednesday. I need to go and get a gift and send her a card. Except she said, every single day with what I'm doing, it involves people. And the light bulb went off for her. And so she accepted it. I had one client who, very much the same, her physical facet was at the top of her hierarchy, self-described as body dysmorphia, and you name it. And she, I don't want to say refused, because it's not up to me to create someone's hierarchy. It reveals itself. But she never did accept that that was at the top of her hierarchy, because she looked at all of the physical details. I don't want to be vain. I'm not vain. I don't consider myself a vain person. And I said, it doesn't have anything to do with that. So at the end of the day, to answer your question, I do the best that I can to help people understand their tools, but where they're at is where they're at. And it's not for me to impose anything on anyone. I call my approach heal it your way. And I 100% recognize all of us are very unique and very different. And we have to honor that. I hope that answers your question.
It does, and I will say you've done something that no other guest has probably ever done of like calling me out and correcting me, and I absolutely love that because never be afraid if we I don't necessarily know, like I don't know the ins and out of what you do and the work that you do, so that I can only, unless I've been through it, can't explain it. So, I definitely love the fact that you went in. It's like, hey, you're kind of asking two different questions, but let me answer them the best way I can. And I absolutely love that. But also, I love how you said, like, a lot of people feel like there is how does the clothes put it? One size fits all model. And as you stated, we're all different. We all have different things, different perspectives, different ways that we think of ourselves. One person could say, well, you're this. And we're thinking, no, I'm not this type of person, but this is what type of person I think that I am. So definitely having that model that everyone realizes it's not one size fits all, and that it is ultimately designed to who they are, and that it helps them understand more about who they are and what's at the top of that hierarchy. That's absolutely amazing. And then I do have one other question, and that question is, what is one mistake that you oftentimes see a lot of entrepreneurs make, and how should it be, and how should they approach it instead?
Oh, wow. So just speaking from personal experience and then observation is having an expectation that I'm going to do something and this is going to be the outcome. And so not being flexible, not being adaptable, and not, for lack of a better word, thinking outside of the box. So we have expectations for how something is going to turn out, how something is going to roll out, and those expectations can actually create resistance and set us up for failure. So it's kind of a fine line, right? We want to have a goal, and yet we also need to be flexible. And I think that is probably one of the more common um, traits that we have where it can actually cause delay. And as I said, create a problem down the road that we could overcome a little more easily if we were more adaptable.
Yeah, definitely. And I always try to end with this question. And it's not so much as a question. Well, coming from me, it is. Um, see, this is this type of person I am. It's like, well, it's a question. No, it's not. Well, it is. When I have to, when we look at it. But if there was one piece of advice that you would give to someone, what what advice or what piece of knowledge would you give them?
Hmm. Nothing is permanent, which there's both sides of that, right? When for instance, my child's death, up until that happened, I was one of the tens of millions of people who you just have a baby and the parents outlive the children. And so I never expected that impermanence, right? Um, and there are many, many tens of millions like me who've experienced that. On the other side of that, it comes back to that adaptability, right? In some way, nothing is truly carved in stone. And so when we can remember that there's always potential, you mentioned being receiving the making it to one of 100 in that speaking contest, and I celebrate that with you. I submitted an article to a big magazine like 5.5 months ago, and 2 days ago, I got the email from them, and I was like, oh, and it says, "We're sorry to inform you." And I was like, oh, but there's a saying, rejection is redirection. And it's to me, it's just another opportunity. And so yep. Was it a bummer? Yep. Did it feel like a little bit of a loss? Yep. And yet I know that, okay, that's not the avenue. And so there's another one. And so that's where that nothing is permanent comes in, where if we can just be curious, lead with curiosity, know that, I lean heavily on hope. To me, hope has to do with there's always potential for whatever we want. And then using all of our resources, our internal resources, our gifts, and then the resources outside of us to make it happen. And sometimes it's like this crazy winding turn, and we get to forks in the road and we have to choose left or right or straight. Um, and yet, all roads, if we're willing, gosh, I've never said this before, I don't think all roads, if we're willing to be open-minded and flexible, will lead us to the version or a version of success that we're seeking. I hope
Absolutely.
that makes some kind of sense.
It does. If you're driving west, I just want to make a quick joke off of this. Um, if you're ever driving in West Virginia, you know West Virginia has their own little theme song, "Country Roads Take Me Home to Where I Belong."
Yeah.
Um, I never thought I would end up in West Virginia, but here I am. And it's a road that I unexpectedly took,
Mhm.
and it's led to a lot of success. It's led to a lot of growth and a lot of um, different perspectives of what life really is.
Mhm.
And so I definitely love the advice that you gave and the knowledge that you gave, and I just want to thank you for being on the show today as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And so my final question,
Oh,
and this final question is, I always say this is one of the most important questions. The interview itself is important, but this question is definitely important. For those that want to get in contact with you, what is the best way for them to do so?
Um, the best way is through my website. It's Anna with a H at the end. So it's a very unique spelling, annaelizabeth.com. All the things are there. And then I'm on the socials, LinkedIn, Anna Elizabeth, and YouTube and Instagram, Anna Elizabeth Heals. So, yeah, the website kind of has all of those branches there. But wherever you're at, I say we are all neighbors, whether somebody is living right next door to me or whether they're in Japan, we are literally neighbors. And so these are all my neighborhoods, as I call it, and everyone is welcome.
Absolutely love that. And for everyone listening, it will be in the show notes. And just remember to keep building, keep learning, and keep moving forward with intention. And if this conversation brought you value, share it with someone who needs it. Make sure you're following the show so you don't miss what's next. And I appreciate you for being here, and I'll see you at the next table. And with that, I'm your host, Dr. DeShaun Williams. And like I said, I'll see you at the next table.
Take care.